last week, when you guys tuned in, we were getting these frame rails up onto the frame table, and everything was turning out pretty good. This week, we're gonna get the front cross member installed and start wrapping up the front suspension. So hang around and check it out. Okay, so simple as that. Just got the frame rail scooted back. In case you guys are wondering what I'm looking at, up here, I have these plumb bobs on these crossbars set up on the center line. And then from the center line, I have measured out the frame markings, which you can see here. So that's what we'll sort of set the spacing side to side. And if you look at the plumb bob, it's hard to tell on the camera, but it is just like, I can just see a sliver of light through it, which is good. So I'll do that on both sides. And that's gonna be within, say, a 32nd of an inch. That's only about, it's a little under a millimeter thick string. So it's gonna be inconsequential to any actual measurements that we actually care about. So the next thing I'm gonna do, off camera, I'm gonna drop this cross member out from underneath this thing, which is sort of a cumbersome mess with all the stuff on it. And I'm gonna try to do that without upsetting the rails, because right now they're just kind of clamped in place. Once that is out, I also need to move this bar back. So this curve comes out here, and you can't really tell on camera, but it's just ever so slightly lifting off here. So I'm gonna move that 6 inches back, and then use that as a clamping point, because I don't wanna put any undue force on that. And then this should be pretty darn close. This rail will be pretty darn close to where it belongs. And then we'll start getting the other rail situated. Same method, same deal, and we'll get it dialed in. Okay, so I'm quickly realizing I do not have enough clamps, even though I have like 50 clamps, because these 4-inch ones are Harbor Freighters, and they must have changed the design slightly from the last time I bought clamps, because they used to be like 4 1/8 inch, which was perfect for taking 4-inch tube and going inside like you see here. This is the old clamp, that's the new clamp. New clamp won't do that. So anywho, what we do have now is this rail is positioned back correctly, and it's positioned like angularly this way along this axis well. We need to check the measurement way up here at the nose yet, but we'll get to that. What we're gonna do now is I took this bar and I'm using it as a straight edge across to the other side. There you can see the measurements. And I have a flange here to act as a rest, and I'm gonna get the right angle up here and clamp the right angle up here and project a line along this plane. I'm gonna do this off camera because I have to also hold an angle finder while I do this to make sure that the right angle is also not canted this direction. And then we're gonna get that measurement traced on. I forgot that this was magnetic, so we'll try to do it on camera anyway. So we'll place this up against here. This is butted against the stop. And then of course this isn't exactly the wrong spot, so I'll move that up there. And I'm just going to sweep this right angle this direction back and forth until I'm at 90. And then I'm going to mark it on the inside edge here. And that will show my center line. And that was about as easy as it gets. So that is front line, front wheel center line. Right there. So you can see there, that's 90 degrees on this direction and this direction, so that should be a good projection upwards. So next I need to get this here exactly half of my frame width from here by projecting a line down and then making sure that that is good to go. And once that is clamped in place, it'll be pretty much good to go. One thing to remember is these frame rails are flipped over and bent a couple different ways. So you can expect a slight bit of bend in this direction. I can't tell any yet, but I know these processes and I know that that's possible. So you wanna make sure you account for that the whole time. You wanna clamp everything down, get it straight as you can to known reference points. So don't assume that the frame rails are straight. Even though you'd love them to be 100% straight, they could be out, you know, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch end to end. And if you just squeeze them in the middle and think that the positions are good, you're probably going to be disappointed when you measure your widths front and rear. So place the entire rail, clamp the entire rail, and then weld as needed to lock it into place. Don't assume that it's okay. So we're gonna probably place this front portion up here and then call it quits. Okay, so we're back. We got the left frame rail or driver's side frame rail installed just the way we did the last one. We have the plumb bob in between the fixture gauge here. We have the measurement up front where the front line wheel center line is, and we have them spaced across from each other in parallel. So right now the frame is parallel in between these two clamps, but there is a little bit of spread at the front where the bends are causing basically a kick out. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and pull those in to the proper dimension and put a little bead on that piece of angle iron up here that we cut. And we're gonna get that the proper dimension across. Then we're gonna go to do the same thing in the back here. And then we should be ready to go and ready to brace up and drop in the cross member. So we'll get started on that. Okay, so we got the front here braced at 29.5 inches across in the OD. And then back here, we have the rear all tacked up and it's 29.5 across. So that is set up nice. Everything from back there, the center clamps here, and the front clamps, all good to go. I did also put the angle finder up on the rails and everything is dead plumb. So everything is within 0.02 of a degree. So we're looking really good there. So that's like down to the minute of an angle. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna pour out this front cross beam that we use to mark the front wheel center line, slide this up into that location, and then we're gonna get the cross member up through the center of the frame table here and start aligning out the cross member between those rails, get it plumb forward and back, and then also twist wise in the truck, and then also axially in the truck. So this one will be a little tricky, so it might take a little bit of time, but we'll just take our time and get it all plumbed in. So that's next. Okay, so you guys saw us getting the frame rail sort of put up in here on the cross member. And what I want you to show you is the gaps. So this is the bottom gap of this frame rail where the cross member fits up in. And then here's the gap on this one. And you'll notice this is about probably a 16th here and probably an 1/8 inch in here. And what that is the frame rail on this side is about a 16th tall. And the frame rail on this side is about a 16th low when we measure it against this surface. And so that's causing that 1/8 inch gap there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna raise this side of the cross member up a 1/16 of an inch, and then we're just gonna tack it shut and call it good. But I think overall, I'm not too concerned about it. That 1/16 of an inch is gonna be minimal. And that gap, I'll be able to fill that no problem. It'll have a good penetration. So we're gonna reset the height on these shim blocks here and get that dialed in. And then once that is done, we will reset the plumb bobs again, recheck the angle, and just keep working on it until we have all three things, the yaw, the axial alignment, and then the forward and back pitch. Once we have that all dialed in, then we'll tack weld it, but keep on working. Okay, so we got the front cross member placed. Dad helped me out here and got the whole thing aligned front to back. We have the angle really close. This cross member, this side of the cross member is twisted probably about 6/10 of a degree forward. So we'll have to watch that in the anti-dive and caster adjustments, but it's not gonna be a big deal. Especially when you look at the width of the A-arms, it's not a big deal. But the gaps look good. The forward and back spacing for caster is good. The truck's not gonna be cockeyed or anything like that. So at this point, we're just gonna do one final check, and then we're gonna clean the frame rails up, bring the welder, flip it around, and start tacking this back in, and we'll keep an eye on it as we weld it, but it's clamped everywhere. Like, this thing's got clamps coming out of its ass. So we're keep on moving here, and we'll just see what we can do. Okay, so it's 2 days later. We got everything tacked in here, looking good. They're more than tacks really, they're kind of like little stitch welds. But overall status of where we're at. The front cross member is in. This frame rail is dead level. This is dead level and flush. Over here, there is ever so slightly a twist in the cross member. So the cross member is actually about 3/10 of a degree forward. So just to put that in perspective, 3/10 of a degree forward, that's not really gonna matter at all. So the only thing that will do is it'll change the caster as the stroke goes, and it'll add a little bit of anti-dive to this side. But what we're talking about, I did the math because I was like a little freaked out about it, and then I did the math and I was like, oh, this really doesn't matter at all. Over a 4-inch stroke or suspension travel, that's like a 15 thousandths shift in the center of the ball joint. So it is absolutely not important at all. The chassis will flex way more than that. It doesn't matter. So we're gonna proceed, keep on welding. I'm gonna go ahead and burn these outside seams next to get the whole thing sort of like sucked in, and then just keep working around and get this all basically seam welded shut. All right, so this is why cleanliness is super important. Welded a nice bead, everything's going good, and all of a sudden I had a little bit of contamination from the back side of this cross member below this weld up. So cleaned it again, started another bead over here, looking fine. So now I gotta cut all this out, this whole region in here where it's contaminated, and work back up. Make sure your stuff is actually clean. I wiped it down with acetone and thought I got it good, but from the inside, when it's getting hot, it's outgassing that fumes, and they're coming out of that port. This cross member is open, so I don't need to drill any vent holes, but this being the highest space, all the fumes rise and it will contaminate your argon, and that's what you got. So yeah, well, we'll grind it out. All right, so we got the first pass back in over top. We're gonna have to go in and lay another cover pass, but that's fixed. Okay, so we got that. It's completely seam welded, and I did my first upside down TIG weld, and I'm happy with them. So I didn't touch the tip, which is always good. So next up, we are going to prep these bad boys, which are the upper control arm mounts. And we're gonna set them up here, and they're gonna be set back 1/4 inch from the front wheel center line, and 3/8 of an inch back from the edge. So I need to measure out 3/8 of an inch, find center on this part, and we'll get them all centered up, and then we'll run a nice little bead on here and on both sides. And then what we'll do later, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, I'm not sure yet, we're gonna cut some gussets, and it's gonna run across this surface here all the way out to the edge. And that way it's gonna give it a nice amount of strength here to prevent this from tipping back. So looking good, we'll start this next. All right, so we're moving ahead. Okay, so we're moving ahead. I print out this little miter block gauge for the 3D, from the 3D printer for the bandsaw to help me set up my angles faster and actually more accurately. Works pretty good. I just got done cutting out some 21-inch tubes, long tubes. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get these braced in right here. So these are gonna be cut on a 30-degree and 60-degree angle and then welded into the frame. And we're gonna tuck them in nice and low. This is a relatively small but thick tube. It's the same thing we use for the lower control arm. And that's gonna help tie the frame together under heavy braking loads to keep that cross member stable and then keep the truck from basically cross shifting where this will twist like this depending on braking load. So it's very strong as it is now, but we want to make it stronger. So we'll stiffen it up here. Okay, so we got them cut out. That was trickier than I anticipated, but because my saw only goes up to about a 45-degree angle, I had to actually put little blocks underneath it and just clamp it manually. So we got these just tacked in here. I'm gonna burn them in, and then I think we'll call it a night. And yeah, so this is just gonna give that a little bit of triangulation in there and support for that cross member, tie it all up. Okay, so we got those welded in, and I think we'll call it a night tonight. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cut out some gussets that go right here on the plasma cutter and weld those in, and then we can start reassembling the front end. But so far I'm pretty happy how everything's staying put. I did notice that this frame rail here, where these were mounted up, pulled in probably like a 1/16 of an inch, but that's okay because the critical dimensions here across the front suspension, we'll just have to make sure when we make our tranny cross member that we measure that 1/16 of an inch and make sure we're good to go there. But yeah, overall, super happy. Things are moving along great and looking good. Okay guys, so that's it for this episode. We're gonna wrap it up. Got the frame rails pretty hashed out up front here, so did the rest of the seam welding and stuff like that on the cross member. And we just need to get the front suspension that we have mounted back up. And in the next episode, we're gonna get the gussets installed for these lower control arms, and then hopefully start building out some of the structure here with more of the coilover hoops, or however we decide to do the coilovers, as well as in the rear suspension here, starting to lay out our 3-link suspension assembly. But we might have to wait for our rear to come in. So gonna try to get rear on order here soon, and then when that is delivered, we'll start fabbing that out. But the goal is to have this thing on wheels by June, and we're cruising along. So if you didn't already, like and subscribe, helps us out and helps the little algorithms on YouTube push it around. So until next time, have a good one.